Welcome to the Wizarding Wireless Network podcast with me, AJ.
And me, Will.
Together we will be bringing you our no-holds-barred thoughts, opinions and detailed analysis on all things Wizarding World. So with that in mind, grab a glass of fire whiskey and settle into this week's episode of the WWN.
Welcome to the Wizarding Wireless Network with your hosts AJ and Will, streaming to you on all of your favourite podcast providers and on YouTube. On today's show, we'll be talking about our opinions on the Dursleys.
Oh, where do we begin?
I know. I mean, they are just the epitome of the worst.
Vile human beings.
To quote the Queen, they are the worst muggles imaginable.
Exactly, and they really are. They really are. There is not a single redeeming quality about any of them.
No. The fact that you get this description of them and they are quintessentially the Roald Dahl-esque villains.
Yep.
That kind of James and the Giant Peach aunties.
Yep.
In aunt and uncle form.
It's sort of as if the aunties from James and the Giant Peach adopted Augustus Gloop. It's like that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach crossover that we didn't need to happen.
Yeah, that shipping that happened probably on some Reddit forum that no one wanted to see.
On the dark web.
Yeah.
Yeah, where it should stay.
Yeah. The fact that we even get like a little description of Dudley, who is this kind of fat little baby that's just ugly and has this little tuft of hair.
Yep.
Is just... It just sums up, like, they could love their child, but only they could love their child.
Literally, that is it. Only them. That phrase, a face that only a mother could love, but only that mother. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less.
Stops at Petunia.
Yep, that is it.
The fact that it's almost like if you shrunk down Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
And put this little, like, tuft of, like, combed cat hair and just plonked it on a baby's head, that would be Dudley.
Yeah, no, that is exactly it. That is exactly it. I think that in the books, though, they do a really good job of describing Dudley as like an absolute hybrid of Petunia and Vernon. Because that's essentially what he is.
Yeah.
It's like if you looked at that child, you can blatantly see, oh, that is your child.
Yeah, you know where that child came from.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean... Talking about their descriptions, what did you think of the descriptions of their characters?
They're very vivid. They didn't really leave a lot to the imagination. And I think the casting of the characters was fabulous. They really were. The only thing I think different-wise would be the fact that Dudley and Petunia are supposed to be blonde.
Yes.
But that's it. I mean, that is literally the only variation. I think Fiona Shaw played Aunt Petunia phenomenally.
Yeah.
She really did.
Yeah.
She's an amazing actress. And the same for Richard Griffiths.
Yeah. I do think that actually if Fiona Shaw had her hair dyed blonde, it would have made it more perfect. It would have just put the cherry on the cake of she is a sorry housewife.
Yep.
She only ever goes out for lunch with the girls.
Only drinks Whispering Angel.
Yeah. And then goes and gets her hair done every week.
Yes.
And gets the roots touched up. That, for me, would have just put the icing on the cake.
Yes.
For her character.
But otherwise, apart from that, they were cast brilliantly.
Oh, absolutely.
And they were played brilliantly as well.
Yeah. You wanted to hate them.
Yes. And they did a really good job of letting you do that.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that they played the whole kind of snobbiness perfectly. That kind of always looking down the end of their nose at Harry.
Yeah. Right question.
Go on.
Worst Dursley. Why?
Oh. I'm going to say, for me, it has to be Petunia.
Why?
Because she knows the stakes. She knows what's going on. Out of all of them, she knows what's happening the most.
Yeah.
And the fact that she is just treating Harry like dirt, like garbage, letting Dudley do whatever he wants, and just turning a blind eye to all of this. I just can't forgive that. Like, you out of all people should know better.
Yes.
And she just doesn't.
Yeah, I know. I think I agree with you to that extent. For me, don't get me wrong, Dudley, I can kind of forgive him to an extent because he is a product of his parents' creation.
Yeah.
Very much like Draco Malfoy. Both of them were brought up in essentially the exact same surroundings, only one came from a Muggle family, one came from a Wizarding family.
Yeah.
And they were basically taught to be prejudiced. Dudley the same for being taught for no one who is different from your basic Surrey house life.
Yeah.
Compared to Draco, if you're not pure blood, then you're dirt.
Yeah.
And it's the exact same.
Yeah.
But I think both characters had like a bit of a redemption arc towards the end. Because albeit as Dudley got a bit older, probably, 15, 16, like an absolute bully. But as he was coming up to, leaving Privet Drive with his mother and father, like he shook Harry's hand. He sort of made amends. That was probably his way of making amends.
Yeah.
Vernon, I cannot stand the man in any way, shape or form. He is just a bully. He is just an absolute bully, and I can't forgive that. But I agree with you when it comes to Petunia, but part of me thinks she is absolutely terrified. Because albeit she knows exactly what is going on, how high the stakes are, she knows better than anyone because she lost a sister, as she said. But to the same extent, she didn't like her sister. She didn't like her sister's husband. That, for me, would you not feel a bit guilty about the way that you've treated your nephew?
You would expect like at least some form of kind of
remorse,
redemption, trying to do good by or correct those things that you have previously said or previously had thought about, no prejudgment. And actually, if she really didn't like the Wizarding World that much, surely the best thing that she could have done was to include him into their household and be a mum to him.
Yes.
Rather than trying to keep him isolated as much as possible and feel isolated. And therefore, whenever he gets a chance to do anything magical, he just goes. Surely the whole idea would be that if she doesn't want him to go off and do magic like his parents, to make the Muggle life seem better.
You would have thought. Although, it does beg the question that Petunia, she seemed to be I think she was exceptionally jealous of Lily. Because, you can't really compete with a sister who's a witch, and a very talented one, if you go by what, Horace Slughorn was saying.
Yeah.
That level of transfiguration magic was astounding. And for her to die, and then for it to reverse.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But I think Petunia was really jealous of Lily. And she resented that fact because she wanted to be the best. That's the impression that I get. She wanted to be the best. She wanted to have the best husband, the best child, the best garden hedges, the best car. She wanted to keep up appearances.
Yeah.
And that would be very difficult to maintain when you've got a sister who's an all-out talented witch.
Yeah, it's the whole thing of keeping up with the Joneses. And
literally, yeah.
That whole thing of, well, if we have people round and have family round, they're going to be the weird ones. We can't be seen to be with weird people.
Yes.
So for her, I think it was more, like you said, that kind of self-image.
Yes.
Of, oh, no, I can't be associated with this person because it's going to affect how I look. Especially in the Surrey area that they were in, that whole kind of white picket fence. If you've got people round who then make you seem less than what you should be, especially in an area, people are going to talk.
Yeah.
And obviously she's then very conscious of that, doesn't want that. She's got a facade to keep up and a reputation to uphold.
She wants to be the centre of attention, but never in a bad way.
No.
And that's the thing. She can't take the bad with the good.
Yeah. I think that comes from like what even is said about her, the fact that she thinks that she is a nice, normal person.
Yes.
She is kind of the person that people aspire to be like.
But that's her definition of normal.
Yeah.
And when you certainly for me, whenever I read the book, she is completely not normal. Like there is something pathologically wrong with her.
Yeah.
And the same for all the Dursleys, really, because I think we'd probably touched on this before, but the way that they treated Harry, if that was found out, and nowadays they'd do time in prison.
Oh, 100%.
Because literal fictional child abuse.
Yeah. Literally, Harry and Dudley would be sent to an orphanage.
They would be.
Like, child services would be taking
Mm-hmm.
action immediately. But I think it's that whole thing of, you're absolutely right with the fact, like, there is just something fundamentally wrong with them, and that how they perceive themselves of actually kind of, to be perceived like that, what they're fundamentally doing is just wrong.
Yes.
In terms of, like, their relationship, so, like, Petunia and Vernon, they just weirdly complement each other.
They do.
Because she is kind of the lady of the house, Mrs. Bouquet,
Yep.
to everyone else. And he is the quintessential breadwinner, works at a good corporate job, brings home money, they can live in a nice area, but at the end of the day doesn't have a backbone.
Yes.
And I think the way that they both kind of work together just sums up their relationship perfectly.
They complement each other completely, but it does not give you a pretty picture.
No.
That's the thing. It's, you put two negatives together, you will not necessarily get a positive. You will get a positive negative.
Yeah. You put two negative signs together, you get an equal sign. Not
Essentially.
a positive.
Well, yeah.
The whole family is just disjointed in itself. I mean, like you said, Dudley just seems to be this kind of hybrid nurture versus nature kind of esque thing that's just there, where he's just unruly because he couldn't do any wrong in his parents' eyes. He can kind of do what he wants. He goes to Smeltings, which is like this prestigious school, and they couldn't be prouder. But at the end of the day, he is a little shit.
Yeah.
And gets away with murder.
Literally, yeah, basically, yeah. It would not surprise me if at some point Dudley did commit murder, GBH, or went to prison.
Yeah.
It honestly wouldn't.
Juvenile record.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that they get him doing boxing as a relief and as a sport, just to kind of give him something to do, in itself
is a red flag.
Is a red flag, absolutely. Like, boxing is one of those things where you give to your child as a way of getting them to build up self-defense or to let out pent-up anger.
Yes.
Because if they don't do it in boxing, they're going to bully people.
Yes. Do you think it was maybe perhaps like a self-defense mechanism for Petunia and Vernon?
What, to send him to boxing?
Yeah.
I think so. I think it was that whole thing of being, again, seen to be doing the right thing. Of, well, it will give him discipline and he'll learn kind of how to correctly handle himself and be a gentleman, because you fight in the ring, but outside the ring, everyone's friends.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I think it wasn't necessarily a conscious decision, but I think it was definitely a decision to go, we need to be seen to be doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Again. And I think a lot of their decisions seems to be focused around what seems to be the correct way of doing things. Hosting dinner parties, going out and giving their kids the best education, not being too loud, too noisy. Like, these are people who aren't going to be having barbecues because they get smoke in their neighbours' windows, kind of thing. Lights off after 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Kind of deal. But, I mean, to a wider extent, would you include Marge as part of the Dursleys? Or would you think Marge is a completely separate kettle of fish?
I think Marge, to an extent, is a separate kettle of fish. I think she is the mothership from which the Dursleys spawned. She is just evil incarnate. If she is a downright Death Eater for the Muggle world. Probably in Britain first.
Yeah.
BNP rallies left, right and centre.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But the thing was, I mean, she just treated Harry horrifically. And to go to that extent of even, bad-mouthing his mother and father in front of him, she's probably never even met them. Because they would have been dead by the time that Harry came along. And Vernon and Petunia would never have introduced James and Lily to Marge.
No.
So she is just literally wrapped up in her own elite world.
And the thing is, she's probably only ever going off of the stuff that her and Vernon have talked about. And I feel like, in a way, as much as Petunia doesn't like her sister, to have that kind of conversation in front of Petunia about her sister,
Yep.
her late sister,
Exactly.
is just
Awful.
insensitive.
Exactly. And the thing is, but I mean, Petunia didn't even jump to her defense.
No.
So that woman literally has no backbone. For someone who's got such a stiff back and keeping the stiff upper lip, no backbone to support it.
But at the same time, do you feel that's because Marge is very much like Vern in that regards, being brother and sister, of actually maybe Petunia's already tried to have her voice and try and go to her defense and just been shot down all the time?
I mean, very possibly. I mean, Marge is very much a strong, resilient woman. And you certainly cannot take that away from her. Because, I mean, look at her hobbies, breeding bulldogs.
Yeah.
Having lunch or, friends with the colonel or the major, whoever it is. But it's somewhat high-ranking army official.
Yeah.
So she sort of gets off on the power, the status. Having that British bulldog has been like a sign of quintessentially everything that she is.
Yeah. She strikes me as someone who's very patriarchal.
Yes.
Like you said, like BNP? BNP. So, like, very much kind of Britain first thing.
Yes.
Like, that is how she comes across.
Yeah, I guarantee you 100% Aunt Marge is a COVID denier, went out during lockdown, vaccines give you ADHD, the whole kit and caboodle. She does not agree with it.
Yeah.
That's the vibe I get from her.
Oh, 100%. She is that woman.
She is that woman.
She is that Karen.
If she had TikTok, she'd be dangerous.
She is that kind of character where I think her and Vernon are very similar in this regard. And I think for them to almost chastise Harry for being related to Lily and James.
Yep.
I think it all comes from that side of the family rather than particularly Petunia.
Yes.
I think Petunia just has this kind of hatred and kind of dislike for Harry, but she never bad-mouths him particularly. That all seems to come from kind of Vernon's side.
Yes. It's almost as if Vernon's loading the gun.
Yeah.
And she's firing the bullets.
Yeah.
On top of Vernon loading his own gun and firing the bullets at the same time. She's just offended even more so. She just gets offended because she's offended. Yeah.
So she's just kind of like going along with the flow. This kind of I think that it always comes back to, for her, that kind of keeping up with appearances. She has to be seen to be agreeing with people because she wants to be liked by people.
Yes.
So to be normal in front of people, she has to agree with what they're saying.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day with her.
Yeah.
I did a bit of kind of background digging with their names and actually looked at kind of where their names stem from.
Okay.
So I looked up, so Vernon means kind of altar grover, or what is like an alder tree.
Okay.
So it's a very hardy tree, but it's particularly known for being the only deciduous tree to have small, tiny cones. Now, I don't know what that says about Vernon himself.
Maybe there's a reason Dudley's an only child.
Maybe. He only had one in him.
Maybe.
But I think it's that whole thing of I think it is almost a kind of subtlety of saying he doesn't have the balls to stand up for himself.
Do you think, when you look back on Prisoner of Azkaban and you see the way that Marge is Lord of the Manor in his own house and he comes in like, "Can I tempt you, Marge?"
Yeah.
With another whiskey. She has completely emasculated him.
Yeah. He is definitely the younger child.
Absolutely.
100%. She is the older sibling. She has always been the older sibling and has had lorded over him the entire time. Absolutely. I had a look at then Petunia. And obviously, Petunia's quite well known, obviously, the flower.
Yep.
But it's known for being hardy. It's a hardy flower. It thrives in a range of different growing conditions. It is resilient. It's persevering. Funnily enough, I don't get any of those kind of qualities from her necessarily.
Well, I get that, But if you think about it this way, so she has got in her mind what she wants. This picture-perfect life of normal.
Mm-hmm.
Her sister comes in and says she's a witch. She needs to deal with that. She then moves away from her sister into her normal life. And then, all of a sudden, in the dead of night, via magical motorbike and octogenarian half-moon bespeckled man, he brings her nephew to the front door, and she gets a letter that she can't share with her son, her husband. Arguably, she would never tell any of her friends. In fact, she would never tell any of her friends because it's too much of a risk. And she has to deal with bringing up her dead sister's son. Because, I mean, she probably found out that her sister died in that letter.
Yeah.
Because that was the night that James and Lily died, was the night that Harry got brought to them.
Yeah.
So you could argue that it wasn't her perfect conditions that she thrived in, but nonetheless, she did still thrive.
True.
In her own way.
And I feel like actually then the resilience is being able to take care of someone who reminds you of your sibling.
Yes.
It's that constant reminder that she's not around.
Yeah.
So I suppose there is those elements of that kind of resilience, perseverance, and kind of striving to have the life that you want despite the adversities that are being thrown at you.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Okay. I take back what I said. You've convinced me. I think actually there is that element of that hardiness around her character. Now, Dudley was a bit more of a difficult one to find anything on. So Dudley means people's field.
Right.
So interpret that as you would, but I kind of got that as showing like a lack of his own personality.
Yep.
Being that kind of having multiple personalities depending on which group of friends you're around.
Yes.
Being the class bully because that's what gets him his friends. But at the end of the day, when he's then apologising to Harry, he's almost seeing like, well, actually, I've been horrible to you for like seemingly no reason just because that's who I was associated with.
Yes.
Again, that whole thing of being a product of Vernon and Petunia, they hate him. They hate Harry, sorry. So he hates Harry.
Yes.
But again, seemingly no reason. So I've taken that kind of as an interpretation of like people's field being everyone can kind of just go there. People can walk over him. He just kind of adapts to kind of who he's around.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether that...
Like, in a sense, he's sort of had to change his personality numerous times to survive in the conditions in which he's in.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when he's at home with Mummy and Daddy, he is Diddikins. He is Mummy's boy.
Yeah.
He's not, like, Daddy's boy, man's man. I mean, he'll go and do boxing and stuff, but that's about it. But realistically, at the end of the day, he's Mummy's boy.
Yeah. He complains that he doesn't get presents. He complains that he doesn't get his own way. He's the only child, despite being around Harry.
Yep. 2 bedrooms.
Yeah.
37 presents.
Yeah. So, I mean, completely a mummy's boy, completely mummied throughout his life. Like, no doubt he is that child in modern day where his mum is still paying for his phone contract at the age of 30.
Absolutely.
And the fact that he ends up going to what is essentially a private school, but seemingly no output for it.
Yeah. It does make me wonder, though, what did Dudley amount to in his future years? Like, did he have a career? We know that he had children, but did he have a career? Did he get a wife? Are they still with them? Is he a homosexual? Did he adopt? Possibly.
Exactly. We need the foreword of Dudley.
We do. We need to know what happened.
I think that's the thing that's always been missed from the films. And I think it kind of griped me that they even filmed it and it became a deleted scene of that redemption that both Petunia and Dudley, well, Petunia not so much, but sort of, kind of had with Harry, that resolution.
Yeah, see that whole deleted scene redemption for Petunia, I'm not buying into that. I'm really not. And
Why?
it's the whole, You didn't just lose a mother that night in Godric's Hollow. I lost a sister. Yeah, you lost a sister when it suited you. If you lost a sister that much and you really cared about it, you would have raised her nephew in a much better way. You would have helped him thrive, not literally locked him under the stairs. I'm just not buying that. That's her just feeling guilty and selfish because she knows that it's coming back to bite her in the backside.
But do you not think that actually she had her hands tied, and the whole thing of what Dumbledore wrote in the letter of having to take care of him because your house is the only house where his bloodline resides, so therefore he's protected whilst under your care, so you've got to take care of this person. She could have said no.
She could have said no.
But she didn't.
Which makes me wonder why.
I get what you mean with the fact of like treating him badly, but at the end of the day, she could have easily just said no and not done it in the first place.
But why? Why did she say yes and then continue to treat him like that?
I suppose it's that whole thing of like, why did Snape treat Harry like a complete arsehole during his school years? Whereas...
That is a whole other episode, and I am geared up and fired ready for that. Do you think it's possibly a bit of guilt?
In terms of like having treated her sister that badly, or...
Treated her sister that badly. The last time she probably spoke to her, she said something probably very horrible to her, called her a freak.
Yeah.
And then to find out that she had been blown up. And then her life has now been dramatically changed because she has to look after Harry. Do you think there's like an underlying element of guilt?
I think so. It's that kind of unresolved resolution with her sister.
Yeah.
That whole thing of, if she had the chance, she would have made amends at some point. I think the thing is, she's never had to apologise to someone.
Yeah, never.
Or apologise for the way that she is. I think this, for me, is the best way that she knows how.
Yeah, I suppose so.
So, in a way, this is kind of like one of those apologies that you kind of go, well, it's a bit of a piss poor apology, but it's the best you're going to get from this person.
Exactly, yeah.
So you kind of either take it or you leave it.
Yeah.
And I think this is definitely one of those situations where you've just got to kind of take it as like, this is her apologising.
Yeah.
In a way, I am kind of gutted that they never included it.
Yeah.
But I kind of obviously see why for the scene. As for Dudley, though, like, that would have been nice to include, but I'm kind of glad that they didn't, because it doesn't make any sense in the films. It makes sense in the books because you get that kind of animosity from both of them throughout, because you get, in the beginning of each book, you get this little segment of the Muggle world of Harry and Dudley.
And it's always grim.
Yeah. It's always boring, it's always grim, they're always fighting, there's always something going on. And this is the point where he goes, I have been absolute dick to you the entire time.
And I am sorry for that.
And I am genuinely sorry. But for that to be in the film, it doesn't make any sense, because the only time you really see it is in the first film, where he's running down the stairs, jumping on the stairs, putting sawdust into his bed.
Yeah.
Other than that, you don't really see him bullying Harry.
Mm-hmm. But then again, remember in the Order of the Phoenix, with that whole bit when Harry's sitting on the swings and he comes up with Piers Polkiss and everything and says, oh, you know, don't kill Cedric, boo-hoo, you cry for your mum, this, all, that and the other. I mean, that's pretty hard going.
Yeah, I think that's the only kind of scene where you see him bullying Harry.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's the first time you kind of see Dudley and his little pack. Because essentially he is the Muggle version of Malfoy.
Yeah, he is.
And you've got him and his little band of Crab and Goyle, where they take the piss out of Harry all the time.
Yeah.
You do get a glimpse of it, and I think it's that whole thing of like, well, you get to see it in that film for a bit of a glimpse, and you have to kind of assume that that's happening all the time.
Yeah.
There's just not enough of it for that one scene of him apologising. Because from a movie reference, you're essentially having that scene as an apology for that one scene in Order of the Phoenix.
Yeah.
Not for kind of like the continuous thing of this is what's been happening the entire way through.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any redeeming qualities, would you say, to the Dursley?
Not really. I mean, I had to think. I did think long and hard.
That was a long pause.
It was. Pause for dramatic effect.
Mm.
No, I mean, I think the years of emotional, physical, intellectual abuse they put that boy under. They're just sheer prejudice people. They are absolutely prejudiced. And they don't like anyone who is not white British. That's it.
They are their own worst enemy.
Yeah, they do create a rod for their own back.
Yeah. And I think they've set themselves up to fail at this point.
Absolutely.
So I don't necessarily think there's a redeeming quality about them, but I don't think that they've done themselves any favours by putting them in that position.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I probably agree that actually there's no real redeeming qualities to them. In terms of a book adaptation to a movie adaptation, do you think that they had done it justice? That description of them into the film?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they played them down to a T.
Yeah?
I really do. I think they played them phenomenally.
Okay.
You?
I definitely think the casting for both characters was, so for Vernon and for Petunia, was spot on. I think the way that they look in terms of how the book described them and how they acted was well played out.
Yeah. What about Dudley?
I think Dudley was a difficult one. I think this has probably been the hardest thing about kind of casting Harry Potter. It would have been that whole thing of you've got to pick a child at the age of 10 that fits the character, but will fit the character
as you go along
and grow up.
Yeah.
So you're almost kind of playing Russian roulette with a cast.
Because that could have gone any way.
Absolutely.
But arguably they took a major risk with every member of that cast.
Exactly. But that's what I'm saying. It must have been that difficult decision of who to pick.
Yes.
Because you're essentially picking your character based on what they are right there and then. Not what are they going to look like later on down the line.
Yeah.
And I think for someone like Dudley's character and how Harry then developed, he definitely looked the part of that bully. More so in the first few films. Yeah. He was definitely that kind of primary school bully look. But later on, I don't know. I think Harry Melling has a very distinguished look.
Yes.
And I think seeing him in something like Queen's Gambit as a completely different role, someone who's very kind and it was very hard to look at him and go, you are a genuine character. Yeah. Not see him as someone like Dudley where he is portrayed as a bully. Yeah. And to have that kind of overall look. I don't know. I think it was during like Order of the Phoenix where he'd grown up a little bit. We hadn't seen Dudley in a film for quite a few films at that point. Like we'd only just seen him at the start of Prisoner of Azkaban. Yeah. For a little bit.
Didn't see him in Goblet of Fire at all.
Don't see him in Goblet of Fire. And then you see him again in Order of the Phoenix. And actually there was quite a lot of gap between the filming of those 3 films. He changed quite considerably in terms of facial look.
Oh god, yeah, dramatically.
And unfortunately he has one of those faces where like his eyes were quite close together. In my opinion. It's my opinion. Fair. It's my opinion. It definitely added to that bully look, but I just don't see... Again, it's that kind of... I think it was more the costume design element. Yeah. Of him wearing the kind of baggy basketball kind of clothes. It just screamed 90s clothes rather than bully. If that makes sense? Yeah. I think it was definitely one of those choices where you've got to make the best decision at the time, but I don't know whether it played out as well as some of the other characters that they casted. Okay. But again, that's what I mean by having a difficult choice to make at this beginning where you've got child actors who are very young and you don't know what they're going to look like as they get older. Mm-hmm.
I do get what you mean, though. It is difficult because I suppose all of these people that we have seen portray these characters from such a young age. Like, it will be very difficult for you to sit and watch a film and go, oh, that's Daniel Radcliffe, no, that's Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And that's all I will ever think of.
Yeah.
Is him. And don't get me wrong, every one of them fantastic actors in their own right. I mean, the film Harry Melling just did recently, where he played Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
Fabulous. It was a fabulous film, but the whole way through it, all I could think was, that is Dudley. But it's just because I've grown up with it, and that's all I've ever known.
And it's almost like a double-edged sword, because you either do what some actors do and they throw themselves into multiple roles to
so quickly
to try and break down that kind of perception of them, or you end up having someone like Rupert Grint and Harry Melling, where there was quite a long time where they did more stage plays and off-air productions, and then suddenly coming back to TV shows and films, and you're almost still followed. You just look like an older version. And I must admit, watching Rupert Grint in like Cabinet of Curiosities, it was still very much like, okay, I feel like I'm still watching Ron. Yeah. Whereas someone like, I think the only one for me where I can watch them in any film and I don't get their character vibes has been Emma. And seeing her play characters in like The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Just, I don't see her as Hermione. So I completely get what you mean. You've definitely got, I think this is where it's going to be very interesting when we get HBO's adaptations.
Definitely.
Of this next wave of child actors, of how they're going to be perceived as they go through it.
The interesting thing for this TV series, and I won't touch too much on it just now, is will they, depending on how quickly they'll film it, how quickly it'll be, if the response is positive, will they keep the same actors the whole way through, or will they pump out 8 series or 7 series, just depending on the books, and go full pelt?
I kind of hope that they do a Game of Thrones with it. And they keep the actors going. And it is a gradual thing, so you get to see them grow up. Because I think that was what was quite nice about the original adaptations. You got to see them grow up. And it was that consistency of like, you'd watch it and you know who the characters were, because that's who you've seen in all of the other ones. I must admit, the one thing I end up doing when I'm rewatching them is I will try and spot which scenes they filmed first and last, because there's certain scenes, especially in the earlier films, of how similar they look to the next film.
Right with you.
Because they're just that much older. And especially in Chamber of Secrets, you then have certain scenes where Ron will look more like he does in Prisoner of Azkaban than he does from Philosopher's Stone. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens with the HBO seasons, and actually whether or not they will keep the same actors, if they were going to do a slow release, if they're going to make sure that actually they do allow them to grow up. And it'll be interesting to see how much airtime the Dursleys actually get in this, because I think if they're trying to eke out these episodes and have them, 45 minutes, hour-long episodes, they're going to have to dedicate a large portion to those beginning chapters where you are in the Muggle world, you are surrounded by the Dursleys a lot more.
As opposed to half an hour for the first film.
Exactly. But also in those books where you see them at the end of the books, where Harry's going home, being collected, are we going to get stuff like that, and seeing them kind of reluctantly taking Harry back? So it will definitely be interesting to see what they do.
What they do with it, So to sum up, the Dursleys are trash. And here endeth the lesson.
So I think we could both agree that the Dursleys are just the worst type.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So thank you, AJ.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you guys again for tuning into the Wisdom Wireless Network podcast. Please make sure to join us again for our 3rd episode which will be focusing on Chapter 2,
The Vanishing Glass.
So make sure to keep your radios tuned in to the Wisdom Wireless Network for the next episode next week. Bye!
Bye!